The VO Mindset series continues. Will you rule your mind or will it rule you? Hi there, welcome to another voiceover tip. I'm Marc Scott and thanks so much for checking out these tips. I really hope that you are being inspired and encouraged by the VO Mindset series. This is probably one of my favorite series that I've ever done on this YouTube channel, and I've posted a lot of videos. But that's because I recognize the value of attitude and mindset and the power of the stories that we tell ourselves. I understand how much these things can impact our eventual success or failure in the voiceover business. So if you never want to miss one of these tips, make sure that you like and subscribe to this YouTube channel so you always get notified when a new tip is getting posted. And once you've subscribed to the YouTube channel, you are also going to be able to find out about Free Advice Friday anytime that I go live on YouTube on Friday afternoons to answer voiceover business and marketing questions absolutely free. You're going to get notified, so make sure that you like and subscribe. So the VO Mindset series continues now, and this week I want to talk to you about whether or not you rule your mind or your mind rules you. One of the hardest lessons that I have ever had to learn in my life was that I have more power to choose my responses and my feelings than what I originally recognized. And the reason why it was a very difficult lesson to learn was because it was very humbling. I think that for so many years, I had a default programmed response to situations where no matter what the situation was, I could find a negative in it. No matter what the circumstance was, I could find a way that that circumstance was against me. Life was against me. The world was against me. People were against me. Decisions that were made were against me. No matter what it was, that was my default response. And the reason why it was so hard for me to address that was because it meant that I had to admit that I had been living in this victim mentality for so many years, and that I had wasted and squandered so many incredible opportunities and potential opportunities just because I couldn't get my head right. I needed to learn that I had the power to control my mind, and that I couldn't just let my mind control me. The stories that I was telling, the stories that my mind was telling, that was a choice. An example that I've given in the past is if somebody walks up to you and punches you in the face, do you have to punch that person in the face back? No. Now, your default response might be to punch them back. That is an understandable default response, but you don't have to do it. You choose to punch them back, just like you could choose to turn the other cheek. Most of us don't make the decision to turn the other cheek because we just go with our default programming. That's why it is so important to understand how to control your mind, because you have to change your default programming. If you go into the booth and you submit 20 auditions on a casting site this week, and you don't get a single thumbs up from any of those auditions on the casting site, is it because you suck? Is that the story that you tell yourself? Well, submitted 20 auditions, I suck. Maybe this isn't right for me. I don't know what's going on. Nobody seems to be interested in what I have to offer. I feel like I'm never going to book another job again. I certainly never book any jobs on these casting sites. Have you ever been there? Have you ever gone there, even if only temporary? Is that the way you have to respond? Is that the way that you have to feel? Is that actually what's going on? Or could it just be that maybe this week you were having an off week? Or maybe this week you were peanut butter and everybody was looking for jelly? Who knows? We'll never be inside of the minds of the people that do these castings. We'll never truly understand what's going on. I would venture to say that if you've been in this industry long enough, you've probably submitted an audition that you thought was the absolute perfect audition, like the best audition that you have ever done in your life. And then you've had an opportunity to hear the finished product. And when you listen to the finished product, you're like, that's what they went with? And you were over here, and what they went with was over here. And now nothing in the world makes sense. So we know that up here. We know that that's the way this so often works, and that casting can be so completely subjective. Ask 100 people what conversational is, you're going to get 100 responses. We know that it is subjective. But when things aren't going in our favor, do we remember how subjective casting can be? Do we remember the crazy reasons why people hire and don't hire voice actors? Or do we just default to a space of, I stink, my auditions stink, my audio must not be good enough, I never book jobs on casting sites? That's the one we always default to. Speaking of which, tell yourself enough times that you never book a job on casting sites, and guess what's going to happen? You're never going to book a job on a casting site. Why? Because your default mindset now is, I never book jobs on casting sites, and so subconsciously you're going to literally keep yourself from booking. It's self-sabotage. You're going to turn that narrative into a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, will you rule your mind, or will you let your mind rule you? When you catch yourself in that moment where that negative narrative is coming to the surface and you're telling yourself, I never book on these sites, I never book voiceover work, my auditions never convert, I never book with my agents, why do I even bother submitting for my agents? I never book with my agents. When you catch yourself with those narratives, are you going to stay in that story? Or are you going to change the script? Are you going to tell a different story? I am going to book with my agent. I'm just waiting for the right opportunity. I'm going to book with my agent. It just hasn't happened yet. I'm going to book with my agent. I will learn the right way. I am going to book with my agent. I will figure this out. Are you going to rule your mind or let your mind rule you? The power of story is so important. The power of story makes so much of a difference. I'm in a place now where most people that know me probably think that I'm a pretty happy, pretty positive guy, right? That I tend to always look on the bright side of things, that I tend to be very optimistic and I'm very filled with gratitude and very helpful, right? I wasn't always that way. And here's another side note, because I'm always very transparent as well. I'm not always like that. The difference now is 10 years ago, when I didn't know any better, I was stuck in this rut. 10 years later, when I do know better, I'm able to catch myself when those negative narratives start coming to the surface. Look, I have bad weeks in voiceover just like everybody else. I have bad months in voiceover just like everybody else. And every once in a while, I start to think this has got to be the beginning of the decline of my career. I'm getting a little bit older now and my voice has changed a little bit and people don't book what I've got to offer and they're looking for something else or whatever. Every once in a while, I get caught in those narratives as well. But now I'm able to recognize those narratives and I'm able to change those narratives. I am able to rule my mind and not let my mind rule me. That was one of the hardest lessons that I had to learn, but it was also one of the most valuable lessons that I could ever learn. That I didn't just have to accept the default response, that I could literally reprogram my brain to view situations differently, to approach circumstances differently, that I could see one thing that is happening and change the narrative or change the perspective so that I didn't get stuck, so that I didn't spiral, so that I didn't let it sink me. Will you rule your mind or will you let your mind rule you? What are the stories that you are telling yourself? I want you to think about the things that you say on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis. Some of those, little quotable quotes or whatever that you repeat over and over and over again. The ones that you don't really think about, the ones that you really don't think have a lot of meaning. Oh, this week stunk. Oh, I can't afford it. Oh, I don't ever book with my agents. So the social media thing, I just don't get it. It doesn't seem to work for me. Nobody ever looks at my posts on Instagram. I send connection requests on LinkedIn, but nobody ever accepts my connection requests. Or, oh, there's a whole bunch more emails that I've sent that are never going to get responded to. And sometimes we say all of these things innocently enough, but we also, if we say them enough, we start to internalize them. And that story that we tell ourselves, whichever one it may be, starts to become the reality. We start to find ways to make it the reality. So you have to check your narratives. You have to take control of your mind and not just let those default responses be what you accept as truth. In one of the earlier videos, I talked about negativity bias. Our brains are programmed to negativity bias. We are programmed to find the worst. We are programmed to see the worst because it's part of our survival instinct. And so we literally have to reprogram our brains in order to overcome this. Learn how to rule your mind instead of letting it rule you, and it is going to make a profound difference in your ability to succeed in voiceover.